Hello guys, welcome back to another 10 underrated commander cards. I always go over just 10 random cards, nothing super relevant to any of the current sets. There might be one or two cards, but this isn't going to be the purpose of this list this time around. We're just going over 10 underrated cards, and they're going to be from all over the place, different sets. May not be the best cards ever, but they definitely should see some more play in my opinion. First card we have to look over is Key to the City. I think I've talked about this card before. It may even be in previous underrated commander cards list, but I still think it's very underrated. If it's a repeat, it's a repeat, but I still think it's worth mentioning. You can discard a card and make up to one creature unblockable this turn. You can do it on your opponent's creatures as well if you want to be a little bit political. Get another player out of the game that way. That is pretty good. And when it becomes untapped, you get to pay 2 mana. If you do, you draw a card. So you get some card draw in addition to making a creature unblockable. Obviously, you want to make your creatures unblockable. It's the whole purpose of the card. You're not going to put it in just for your opponent's creatures. So I'm immediately thinking about the new Ninja Commander Yuriko, as well as just any good Voltron commander that you want to make unblockable. Not a bad card. Extremely cheap too if you're looking for something to both help you out in combat and give you some good card draw. The next card is Thran Temporal Gateway. This is probably the most surprising card on this entire list to me, that it just hasn't really caught on yet. You can pay 4 mana, tap it, and you get to put a historic permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. So artifacts, legendaries, sagas. Legendaries, of course, now includes planeswalkers, so if you want to go that route, you can do that and put in something like a Nicol Bolas or an Ugin. It's something that's more expensive than 4 mana, so you're actually getting more value. But probably the most underrated thing about it is that, kind of like Quicksilver Amulet, you can do this at your opponent's end step right before your turn, so you have the card that you want on the battlefield, and you have your Thran Temporal Gateway untapped during your turn, so you have the advantage of timing. Arguably better than Quicksilver Amulet in certain situations, but I do know that card has seen a lot of play in decks like Kaalia, Emael, the Anima, just any deck where you have a theme with cheating creatures out into play. This may not be a bad option for either of those decks. The next card we have is Children of Corliss. Just a 1/1 for 1 white mana. Sacrifice Children of Corliss, you gain life equal to the life that you have lost this turn. May not seem like a big deal, but 1-drops are so underrated. They can really set the tone for the rest of the game. Probably my favorite spot for this is going to be Aetherios God of Passage, something that your opponents probably don't want to lose 3 life just to keep this in the graveyard, so you can keep gaining life. It's probably going to keep coming back to your hand. Very good if you want to stabilize late game. Something like this is amazing. It's also kind of funny because I remember someone at my local game store saying this is probably the most evil card in Magic because the first 2 words of the rules text is sacrifice children. Anyway, the next card is Balancing Act. Very similar to Balance. I wouldn't say it's as good because it's not as specific about lands and creatures. It's just permanents. It's a little bit more fair in that sense, but it's going to kind of serve the same purpose as Balance. It is 4 mana. In a lot of cases, this is going to be alongside your Wrath of Gods, your other 4 mana board wipes, but it's really good if you don't play a lot of lands in your deck, if you're more the aggro white deck, or you don't play a lot of creatures. If you have the least amount of permanents, this is usually going to benefit you the most. Same thing goes with the least amount of cards in your hand. Again, aggro decks tend to have the least amount of cards in their hand anyway, so one way or another you're going to benefit the most from this if you build your deck around it, and that's usually what you're going to do anyway. The next card we have is the first blue card. We have Pemons Aura. This has 4 activated abilities, all pretty good, all versatile. You can build around it in different ways. The first one, you can untap the enchanted creature, so if you have anything with a crazy good activated ability, like Arcanus the Omnipotent, you can then draw another 3 cards, that's pretty good. Or you could give the enchanted creature flying until end of turn, that's always good. And you can basically give the enchanted creature Shroud until end of turn. And then the final ability is kind of like those Aetherling creatures that can give themselves an increase in power at the cost of toughness, or an increase in toughness at the cost of power. Not really my favorite ability, but you do have options, which is the most important thing to remember. The next card is a card you've probably seen before in a lot of my deck decks, Falconwrath Noble. I always put it alongside Blood Artist, or at least I try to, because it's pretty much the same card for 4 mana, and you get a 2/2 flyer, so it's a better creature overall, more expensive, but in Commander, it's not that big of a deal. You're paying 2 more mana for basically the same card. Blood Artist is already arguably one of the best creatures as far as Black goes in the entire format. I wouldn't say Falcon Wrath Noble is far behind that, or even Zulaport Cutthroat, even though most people would choose to go for those two drops over Falcon Wrath. But if you're playing any sort of aristocrats kind of build, black-white, more of the same consistency, that's not a bad thing. And then the next card we have is Fateful Showdown. It's going to deal damage to target creature or player equal to the number of cards in your hand, and then you discard all the cards in your hand, and then you draw that many cards. This is also at instant speed, which is kind of unusual for any sort of wheel to be at instant speed. Usually this is sorcery speed. On your turn, you just use up that 3 mana for your Wheel of Fortune, but you also have the benefit with those cards of wheeling your opponents, so decks like Nekasar will like those more, then they'll probably like this card. Fateful Showdown, I think, is still very good. If you want to play mono red, card draw is not a bad thing, especially if you can guarantee it's just card draw for you. In addition, you also get some removal, or you can burn your opponent. So it's a versatile red card. Kind of surprised that it hasn't caught on yet all the way back in Kaladesh a couple years ago. Whenever I look to build a mono red deck, I definitely consider Fateful Showdown. Maybe even more so than Wheel of Fortune, but still, if you're looking for a budget option in card draw and red, Fateful Showdown is definitely one to check out. The next card here is probably one of the best cards I would say on this entire list. Incredibly underrated. Loaming Shaman. When it enters the battlefield, target player shuffles any number of target cards from his or her graveyard into their library, which is incredibly powerful in certain matchups. If you love graveyard hate, if you love anything that can manipulate your graveyard, you never know, maybe it's late game, all of your creatures are in your graveyard, or at least all of the good ones anyway. You want a way to get those back, you want a way to stay in the game. I personally, though, think it's much more powerful if you choose to go with hating on your opponent's graveyard. There's so many good combo decks that associate with recurring creatures from the graveyard, whether it be artifact combo decks, or just any good deck like Carador or Marin. Those decks are in love with their graveyards. May not be a Tormod's Crypt, something that you could bring back and exile a graveyard, but Loaming Shaman I think is just as good if your goal is to get rid of creatures. And then the next card we have is probably one of the only Planeswalkers I've ever put on one of these lists. That's Kaya Ghost Assassin. Now, she may not be one of the most powerful Planeswalkers in the entire format, but she does give you some decent consistency. She doesn't have a plus, so there's really no ult there. She just has a 0, a -1, and a -2. Her 0, you just exile Kaya or another creature, and then it comes back into play under its owner's control. Your next upkeep, you lose 2 life, so you can reset her this way. Pretty easy to do that. Or you could use it to get some value out of another creature you have. Her -1 isn't really that big of a deal. I hardly ever use it unless I need to gain some life for a trigger. Otherwise, hopefully this is a way that we can grind down our opponents with life loss. And then her -2 is probably the best thing about her, because if you have any way of blanking Kaya, resetting her loyalty, being able to use her abilities again, forcing each opponent to discard a card and allowing you to draw a card is crazy underrated in Commander. It nets you advantage over your opponents. They're losing advantage. Control matchups, it's perfect. With the new Commander option in Aminatu, you're capable of instantly just blanking her, resetting her loyalty that way, making your opponents discard another one. And again, she can even reset herself, so you're able to keep her out there long term and just keep forcing your opponents to discard cards. I absolutely love her. If you want to play Control, she's good in Control. If you want to play Life Gain, Life Loss, she's good in there. Or even any discard themes, I would imagine she's just as good in those. Which brings us to the last card on this underrated Commander cards video, Vella the Nightclad. This is the only Commander option I believe on this whole list. Was reprinted in Commander 2017, but that was for the Wizard deck. And for the longest time, she has been the chosen Commander for the Ninja deck until now, I would say. We have a much better one. But all of your other creatures you control have Intimidate, which was good for ninjas. They can attack, bring out more ninjas. It's a good thing. Whenever Vela or another creature you control leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. So the problem with her was the fact that in ninjas, you kind of could work around with this. If you could constantly bring back ninjas to your hand, you can get that trigger, bring other ones into play. If you have multiple ninjutsus, you might be able to drain some life away from your opponents. But right now, I think she has combo potential with Aminatu, because if you have Felidar Guardian and you have Aminatu, you have infinite ETBs, and Felidar Guardian is going to be leaving the battlefield an infinite number of times, so that right there is going to be an infinite combo. It may not be the most efficient one, but it is technically a combo. Some people don't like combos, so if you don't like it, I still think she's very good as a commander if you want to build around blue-black tokens even. Throw in things like Blood Artist, Zulaport Cutthroat, Falcon Wrath Noble, the ones I love putting in decks just to drain away a bunch of life from your opponents. Throw out some sacrifice outlets. And hey, I mean, if you love Deadeye Navigator, throw in ways to untap your lands with Palinchron or Peregrine Drake, get infinite ETBs that way. Infinite creatures leaving the battlefield triggers, whatever you want to call them. Vella the Nightclad is super deadly. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know what you think about these 10 underrated commander cards. Feel free to leave any suggestions in the comment section below. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.